Before we could even settle into patch 1.4, patch 1.5 has come along and changed the meta once again, introducing many buffs and nerfs that have made it difficult to determine which weapons are now best. So in this video we're going to find out which weapons are best and crown the new kings of patch 1.5. Now if you've not seen this chart before, it shows damage on the left in millions and time on the bottom in seconds. This displays the damage over time of certain weapons so we can compare them effectively. As an example here, starting with the assault rifle weapon category, here is how the ACRs perform on this chart, and here are how the AKs perform on this chart. Comparing them, we can see that the ACRs have better burst damage, but the AKs can fire for longer before reloading. The other assault rifles are the FALs, which are free shot burst fire weapons, G36s, M4s, P416s, SCAR Ls, and the newly added FAMAS. Because gear scores have increased up to 256 for weapons and weapon mods, the M4s are now superior for sustained damage over the G36s. In fact, they're the best weapons for sustained damage of the assault rifle category, and the M4s are still the best burst damage weapons of the assault rifle category too, making the M4 easily the best assault rifle. But the only M4 that's worth using is the LVOAC variant. Moving on to LMGs, and this is where some major changes have taken place. We have the LE26s, M249s, M60s, RPKs, the named weapon the Pakhan as it's an RPK with higher base damage, the named weapon the Hungry Hog as it's an M60 with a higher base damage, and the newly added MG5. In a previous video I explained how the MG5 was a beast, but being sneaky devs, Massive have stealth nerfed the MG5's base damage by around 22%, putting it on par with the burst damage of the Pakhan now. Now because the MG5 has such a long reload time and takes long to become more accurate compared to the Pakhan is now the best LMG in the division, and it comes with decent weapon talents as standard. The Hungry Hog, on the other hand, has been nerfed to the point where it's useless now, as the M60 with good talent will beat it in every way. The Marksmen Rifles include the M1As, custom M44 as it's the only M44 to allow a mag mod, the Scar Hate variants, SRSs, SVDs, and the newly added M700s, of which the tactical and carbon variants are best due to them reloading much faster. Not much has changed here. The Scar H's are still beast, the M1As are still redundant, but the new M700s are the best bolt action rifles for PvE content due to their sustained damage. Now this weapon category has taken a hard hit due to the headshot formula changes this patch, but it's not the most affected weapon category of the 6, meaning snipers are still a viable option in PvP and PvE, just not as much as they were in 1.4. The most affected weapon category in this patch are the shotguns, consisting of the Showstopper, double barrels, M870s, SCSGs, and Super 90s. Now this weapon category received a flat headshot damage nerf relative to around 11% this patch, and if that wasn't enough, the M870s got a nerf of their own to their base damage, making the Showstopper, as shown here, better for burst damage and sustained damage compared. Sad times for the M870s. Because of these changes, the Super 90s are now far superior over the M870s for PvP, where the SSGs are still the best option for PvE content. Moving on to the sidearms, we have the Magnums, M1911s, Officer's M9A1 due to its increased mag size, the custom variant of the PF45 due to its mag size, PX4 Storms, the first wave version of the X45 due to its increased mag size, the newly added 93R free shot burst fire pistol, and the newly added Rhinos, of which the Rhino Special variant is best as it allows an optic attachment. The 93R has a monstrous amount of RPM, but it's crippled by its extremely low base damage, where the Rhino Special is exactly the same as a Magnum, but it allows attachments, hence why it ranks higher here. Now this does change the meta slightly, as the Magnums were the best burst damage sidearms of 1.4, but that trophy now belongs to the Rhino Special. The best PvE sidearm is still the X45, the first wave version that is, but the 93R is now the best sidearm for utility. So if you want to apply bleed to fleeing targets, or want to get those sentry stacks up the fastest, the 93R is the best choice, at the cost of doing less damage. And finally we come to the SMGs, which have received a little love in this patch. These include the AUGs, full auto MP5s, the MP7, PP19s, T821s, SMG9s, Vectors, and the newly added UMPs. If you didn't read the patch notes for patch 1.5, the MP7 got a buff in its base damage, making it once again, as shown here, the best burst damage SMG in the game, where the PP19 is still the best SMG for sustained damage. The Vector also received a buff. Its mag size has been increased from 20 to 25, putting it on par with the AUG, but it's still not enough to make the Vectors a viable choice. In fact, with how LMGs and assault rifles are in this patch, SMGs in general are quite redundant. Now if we put the best burst damage weapons from each weapon category into one chart, we have the LVOAC of the assault rifles, the Pakhan of the LMGs, the SVDs of the Marksmen Rifles because they're much easier to handle in burst fire situations, the Super 90s of the shotguns, the new Rhino Special of the Sidearms, and the recently buffed MP7 of the SMGs. So the SVDs are still one of the best burst damage weapons in the game, and the Super 90s haven't been too affected by the headshot nerf the shotguns received this patch. However, adding the enemy armor damage bonus assault rifles passively have in PvP now, we can see that the LVOAC now has more burst damage than a frickin' Super 90, making shotguns in PvP a bad choice in this patch as an automatic weapon is better and requires less skill. Again, adding the passive bonus of the LMGs to this chart, the Pakhan now has roughly the same burst damage as the Super 90, but not as much as the LVOAC, kind of making the LVOAC the best PvP weapon in this patch, as consistently headshotting with an SVD isn't an easy job in PvP. Now if we look at the best sustained damage weapons in this patch and therefore the best weapons for PvE, we again have the LVOAC of the assault rifles, again we have the Pakhan of the LMGs, the Scar H variants of the Marksmen Rifles, the SASGs of the shotguns, the first wave X45 of the Sidearms, and the full auto MP5s of the SMGs, as I believe they're just as good if not better than the PP19s. Obviously the Scar H's are in a league of their own here, being that they're the only weapon to literally go through the roof of my chart here, but if you're not a sniper fan, the LVOAC, if we add the passive bonus, has some really good sustained damage. Even when we add the Pakhan's passive bonus, the LVOAC is still a better choice for sustained damage. However, because the LVOAC is much harder to control than the Pakhan, I would say that they're both great choices for PvE in this patch, the LVOAC being for damage hungry players and the Pakhan being for players that prefer a controllable weapon, but you can always equip both. So in conclusion, the best burst damage weapons and therefore best weapons for PvP in 1.5 are the LVOAC, the Pakhan, the SVDs, the Super 90s, the Rhino Special and the MP7. The best sustained damage weapons and therefore the best weapons for PvE in patch 1.5 are the LVOAC, the Pakhan, the Scar H variants, the SASGs, the first wave X45 and the full auto MP5s, all PP19s. If you're looking for my input on which weapons you should use in this patch, the LVOAC is the go-to weapon for PvP, and the Pakhan, LVOAC or Scar H variants are all great choices for PvE content. Thank you for watching, thank you very much to Spider once again for his stat cheat sheet, and if you want a Pakhan, there is a vendor in your base that sells it.